The Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles stood at full capacity on the night of March 14, 1981, 4,200 seats. Every one of them filled. The house lights had not yet dropped, and the crowd moved and murmured the way crowds do before something large begins. Shifting in their seats, reading their programs, speaking to whoever sat beside them about whatever small thing passed between people who did not yet know the evening would give them something to talk about for the rest of their lives. The stage was wide, 42 feet across, dressed in black curtain and temporary scaffolding, with 6 security personnel stationed at intervals along the apron. These were not contract guards hired for the night. They were professionals, 3 of them former law enforcement, 1 a retired military policeman with 8 years of service. Their combined weight ran close to 1,100 pounds. Their combined height, if you stacked them end to end, would have cleared 3 stories. The smallest of them stood 6 feet 1 and had spent 4 years working stadium events across Southern California without an incident he had not resolved in the first 30 seconds. The show that evening was a charity gala in support of veteran rehabilitation programs, a cause that drew both donors and entertainers in numbers the organizers had not fully anticipated. The room smelled of wool and perfume and the particular warmth that collects when too many people occupy a space designed for slightly fewer. The temperature at stage level was 19 degrees above what it was on the street outside. At the back of the room, in the 4th row from the rear on the left-hand aisle, a man sat in a folding chair that had been added when the original seating ran short. He wore a denim jacket over a plain white shirt, dark trousers, boots with no particular distinction, a cap pulled low enough that the brim rested at the level of his eyebrows. He was 40 years old. He weighed 179 pounds. He sat with both hands rested on his knees, watching the stage the way a man watches a fire, without urgency, without expectation, without any particular intention of moving. Nobody in that row knew who he was. Nobody in the 3 rows surrounding him appeared to notice him at all. In approximately 4 minutes, the head of security for the Shrine Auditorium was going to walk toward that man with a purpose. In the 45 seconds that followed, 6 trained professionals were going to discover, in sequence, that the purpose they arrived with was not one they would be completing, and not one of them would be able to say afterward exactly how it happened, only that it did, and that the man in the denim jacket had not raised his voice once. Nobody in that building knew what was about to happen. The man in the 4th from last row already knew how it would end. He had known since before he sat down. The charity gala had been organized in the preceding 8 weeks by a committee of 11 people, none of whom had coordinated an event at this scale before. What they had was enthusiasm, a cause that mattered, and enough connections in the Los Angeles entertainment community to fill 4,000 seats. What they did not have was a clean process for managing the backstage credential system. By 7:45 in the evening, the side entrance to the building had received approximately 230 people in the course of an hour. Donors, performers, press, production staff. The credentialing table had been overwhelmed by 8 o'clock, and the 2 volunteers managing it had done what overwhelmed volunteers always do. They had begun waving people through on the assumption that anyone arriving with confidence belonged there. It was this assumption that would set the evening in motion. The head of security, a man named Gerald Foss, was 51 years old and had spent 19 of those years managing venue security at events ranging from small theater productions to arena concerts. He was methodical, he had a protocol, and he followed it. When he received a report at 8:14 that an unidentified individual had entered the seating area without a verifiable credential, he did not send someone else, he went himself. Gerald Foss was 6 feet 3 inches tall. He had been a police officer in Los Angeles County for 6 years before moving into private security. He had resolved physical confrontations without serious incident on at least 30 separate occasions across his career, a number he could recite without hesitation because he kept a written record. He was not a man given to doubt. He was not a man who expected to encounter something he had not encountered before. He found the individual in question in the 4th row from the rear left aisle. The man was sitting with both hands on his knees, watching the stage, unmoving. Gerald Foss approached from the right and spoke in the level. practiced tone that had served him through 30 incidents and was about to fail him in a way he would spend a long time afterward trying to explain. He said, "I need you to come with me." The man in the denim jacket looked up at him. He did not stand. He did not argue. He said, "I was invited." Gerald Foss said, "I need to verify that, sir. I need you to come with me." The man said, "Give me a name to call." Gerald Foss said he did not have a name. He said the protocol required the individual to accompany him to the credentialing table. He said this was not a request. The man in the denim jacket looked at Gerald Foss for approximately 2 seconds with an expression that was not hostility and was not submission. It was something else. It was the expression of a man measuring a distance he had already measured before the other man arrived. Then he stood up. He was not tall. He stood 5 feet 10 inches in his boots. He did not straighten to his full height in any dramatic way. He simply stood, and something happened in the space between the two men that Gerald Foss would not find words for until 3 days later, when he told the story to a colleague over a cup of coffee in a parking lot. He said, "I have been in this work for 19 years, and I have stood in front of a great many people. And there are maybe 3 or 4 people I have stood in front of in 19 years, where the size of them is not in their height or their weight. It is in something else, and you know it inside the first second." He paused before he said anything further. Then, he said the man had not said a single word while standing. He had only stood. And Gerald Foss had felt the situation change. But Gerald Foss was a professional and he had a protocol and he followed it. He gestured toward the aisle and said, "This way, sir," and the man in the denim jacket reached up. He removed his cap, he folded it once along the brim, he set it on the seat beside him with a deliberateness that was not slow and was not fast but was the exact speed of a man who has decided something without needing to announce it. Then he looked at Gerald Foss and he said, in a voice pitched low enough that only the two of them could hear it, "All right." He had already won. Gerald Foss did not know it yet. If you want to understand what happened next, you need to understand what Chuck Norris was in the month of March 1981, and more importantly, what he had been in the 12 years that preceded it. Because the man standing in the aisle of the Shrine Auditorium that night was not a movie character. He was not a legend in the inflated sense that word acquires over time. He was something more specific and more difficult to manufacture. He was a man who had spent more than a decade acquiring a particular kind of knowledge under conditions that had no tolerance for pretense. He had begun his martial arts training in 1958 at the age of 18, while serving as a military policeman with the United States Air Force in South Korea. He had trained in Tang Soo Do under circumstances that had none of the softness of recreational practice. He had trained with people who were not interested in his progress, except as a reflection of their own standards. He had learned what it was to be thrown, and to stand up, and to be thrown again. Not as a progression toward mastery, but as the daily condition of a student who had not yet earned the right to stand without falling. He had returned to the United States and continued training. He had competed. Between 1964 and 1968, he had accumulated a competitive record that was, by the standards of American karate in that period, exceptional. He had won the Professional Middleweight Karate Championship in 1968. He had defended it 5 times. He had retired from competition in 1974 with a record that his contemporaries, the ones who understood what the numbers meant in context, did not dispute. He had also, by 1981, begun the work that would make him known to the wider world. He had appeared in films. He had built a following that was not the following of a performer but the following of a man who had done something real and continued to carry the evidence of it in the way he occupied space. He was 40 years old on the night of March 14, 1981. He weighed 179 pounds. He was standing in the aisle of the Shrine Auditorium next to a 6'3" former police officer who had been told to remove him and who had, in the previous 30 seconds, begun to understand that the evening was not going to proceed the way he had assumed. If you have found something in this story that matters to you, take 10 seconds right now. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from tonight. The full account of what happened in the next 45 seconds what was said, what was not said, and what Gerald Foss wrote in his incident report the following morning is ahead. But the story is only as valuable as the people it reaches. Stay with it. Gerald Foss had a procedure, and the procedure called for the individual to be escorted to the credentialing table. He was still operating under that procedure when he reached for the man's elbow. He did not make contact. This is the first thing that Gerald Foss would report as remarkable when he told the story afterward. Not that anything aggressive happened, not that he was blocked or redirected in any obvious way, simply that his hand moved toward a position in space, and when it arrived, the position was no longer occupied. The man had not stepped back. He had not moved in any direction that Gerald Foss could name with precision. He had simply shifted his weight by some fraction of an inch in some direction that was not lateral and was not rearward, and the point of contact that Gerald Foss had intended was no longer available. It took Gerald Foss approximately 1 full second to process what had occurred. A fight is not two bodies making contact. A fight is a negotiation about space. Every meaningful exchange begins with a question about distance: who controls it, who is willing to surrender it, and who understands that the person who establishes the terms of the distance has already determined the outcome before anything else has happened. Most people who enter physical confrontations do so without understanding this. They understand size, and they understand aggression, and they understand the advantage of surprise. What they do not understand is that the man who dictates where the exchange happens has already answered all of the questions that the other man is still asking. Chuck Norris had spent 23 years learning to ask no questions. Gerald Foss recalibrated. He was a professional. He stepped to his left to re-establish the angle. The man in the white shirt was already at a different angle. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would have been visible to anyone watching from more than 10 feet away. But the geometry between them had changed in a manner that Gerald Foss had not initiated and could not account for. He was, without understanding how, standing in a position from which the options available to him were fewer than the options he had begun the encounter with. He looked at the man. The man was looking back at him with the same expression he had worn since the beginning. Not patience, exactly, something older than patience. The expression of a man who is waiting for a question to be answered that he already knows the answer to. A woman named Patricia Langhorne was seated in the 3rd row from the rear, 6 seats to the right of the aisle. She was a choreographer. She had spent 11 years working in professional dance and had developed, through that work, an eye for the relationship between bodies in space that most people do not acquire. She had been watching the exchange from the moment the large man in the jacket had walked toward the man in the denim jacket, and she would tell the story 14 years later at a dinner in Pasadena to a group of people who had never been in that building. She said, "I have spent my entire career watching the way people use their bodies, and what I saw was not a confrontation. What I saw was one man asking a question with his body and another man answering it. And the answer was so complete that the question stopped being asked. I have only seen that twice in my life." At the credentialing table, a volunteer named Marcus Webb had been managing the overflow for approximately 20 minutes when he received a call on his radio from Gerald Foss. The call was shorter than Marcus Webb expected. Gerald Foss said, "I need a name check. Chuck Norris." Marcus Webb did not need to check a list. He recognized the name before Gerald Foss had finished saying it. Gerald Foss put the radio back in his jacket. He stood in the aisle for a moment that was not long but was not short either. Then he looked at the man in the white shirt and he said 3 words. He said, "I am sorry." The man in the white shirt did not say that it was fine. He did not say that there was no harm done. He looked at Gerald Foss and he said 2 words. He said, "Good work." That was the whole of it. What Gerald Foss would not understand until he had walked away and resumed his position near the stage was that those 2 words had resolved something in him that the apology had not. He had done his job. The man had confirmed it. There was no residue. The 4 security personnel who had been moving toward the aisle as backup arrived in the same moment that Gerald Foss turned away. They read the situation from his posture before he said anything. They stopped. 3 of them looked at the man still standing in the aisle. One of them, a man named Darius Cole, who had spent 6 years working arena security and 2 years before that as a boxing trainer, kept looking for approximately 4 seconds longer than the others. Darius Cole would say, later, that what he had seen was not remarkable for what happened. What was remarkable was the quality of the stillness. He said, "I have been around fighters my entire adult life. I have trained fighters. And there is a stillness that some people carry that tells you something has been resolved in them that most people spend their entire lives trying to resolve. I have seen it in 4 people. That night, I saw it in one more." The man in the denim jacket sat back down. He reached over and picked up his cap from the seat beside him. He did not unfold it immediately. He held it in his hands for a moment and looked at the stage, where the lights had just begun their slow transformation from house settings to performance levels, the gold of the room draining out and the blue of the stage coming in. Then he set the cap on his knee. He did not put it back on. He watched the stage with his hands rested on either side of it. The show had not started yet. Nobody in the 4th row from the rear knew who he was. Nobody asked. The man beside him had been watching the aisle since the moment the security personnel arrived, and when they left, he turned back to his program and turned a page and did not speak. What spread through the room did not spread immediately. It moved the way information moves in a space where 4,000 people are seated close together, and the channels of communication are the ones that have always existed. One person to the person beside them, and that person to the one beside them, carried not in full sentences but in the small abbreviated versions of a story that its teller does not yet fully possess. By the time the show began, 11 minutes after the moment Gerald Foss turned and walked away, the account had reached approximately 300 people in varying forms. In some versions, the security personnel had attempted a physical removal and been redirected. In some versions, words had been spoken that nobody who was actually present could verify. In one version, which reached the 3rd row of the right center section in the form of a whispered sentence between 2 men in evening clothes, the entire incident had lasted 30 seconds and had ended with 6 security personnel standing motionless in the aisle. The version that traveled furthest and with the most accuracy was also the simplest. A man had been asked to leave, and something had happened. And then he had been allowed to stay, and nobody who had seen it up close was fully able to describe what the something was. A sound engineer named Robert Prater was working the mixing board 40 feet behind the rear of the seating area. He had been in the industry for 16 years and had worked events from small club stages to full arena productions. He had a clear sight line to the aisle from his position and had watched the entire exchange from beginning to end without being close enough to hear any of it. He said 2 weeks later to a colleague in a studio in Burbank, "I have been doing this work for 16 years and I have seen a great number of things on a great number of stages and in a great number of rooms. What I saw that night I am going to tell you in one sentence, and you are going to believe it or you are not going to believe it, and either way it will be true." 6 people went to remove one person, and the one person did not move, and the 6 people came back without him. He paused and drank his coffee. He said, "And I could not tell you what happened in between. I was watching, and I could not tell you." Gerald Foss filed his incident report the following morning. He wrote 4 paragraphs. The first described the initial complaint and the protocol he had followed in responding to it. The second described the approach and the request for the individual to accompany him to the credentialing table. The third paragraph was the shortest. It read, "Upon verbal identification, subject was confirmed as invited attendee Chuck Norris. Situation resolved without incident, no further action required." The fourth paragraph was not standard to the incident report format. Gerald Foss wrote it anyway. His supervisor read it and did not remove it. It stayed in the file. It said, "In 19 years of this work, I have had occasion to approach individuals in circumstances where the authority was mine and the compliance was theirs to give or withhold. On most occasions, there is a transaction. On this occasion, there was no transaction. I do not fully understand the distinction, but I believe it is worth recording." The incident report remained in the Shrine Auditorium security files for 11 years. a researcher working on a retrospective of charity events in the Los Angeles entertainment community found it in 1992 while reviewing administrative records. She noted it and moved on. She was not looking for what it was. The story it contained had already traveled far enough without her help. In dojos across Southern California in the months following March 1981, the story appeared in the form it always appears in when it passes through communities of people who, trained, condensed, sharpened, stripped of detail, and concentrated to its essential point. The details varied. The number of security personnel varied. The length of the encounter varied. What did not vary was the central fact, the one that every version preserved without distortion: the man had not moved. The space around him had reorganized itself, and the people who had come to require something of him had, without being touched, without being threatened, without being given any instruction whatsoever, decided not to require it. Instructors used it in the way instructors use such stories, not as evidence of physical capability but as evidence of something else, something that did not have a clean name in most of the languages in which it was discussed, but that pointed always in the same direction, the direction of a man who had finished the argument with himself before the argument with anyone else became necessary. Gerald Foss retired from venue security in 1997. He spent his last working years managing security operations for a small production company in the San Fernando Valley. He told the story from the Shrine Auditorium on 3 occasions that are known: the parking lot conversation in 1981, a security industry conference in 1989 where it came up during a panel discussion, and a retirement dinner in 1997 where a colleague asked him directly if there was an event from his career that he thought about more than the others. He said, yes. And then he told it again, in the same order with the same pauses, as if he had been carrying the shape of it undisturbed for 16 years and was simply setting it down. He said that what he remembered most was not the moment his hand did not make contact. He said he had thought about that moment a great many times, and he believed it was real, and he believed it was not an accident. But what he remembered most was the 2 words at the end: good work. He said, I had done my job. A man I had just tried to remove from a room told me I had done my job. And I believed him. I believed him completely. I have thought about why I believed him, and I have only ever arrived at one answer, which is that the only people who can tell you that kind of truth are the ones who have no reason to lie and nothing to gain from your comfort. Chuck Norris did not tell the story publicly. This is consistent with every other account from people who knew him across this period. He did not tell stories in which he was the subject. He trained. He worked. He taught. He was known among the people who trained with him in the years following for a particular quality in the way he corrected students, which was that he corrected them toward the thing itself and never toward the impression of the thing. There is a distinction between those 2 directions, and most teachers do not live in it. He lived in it. There is a principle that exists inside the oldest traditions of every fighting art and that gets lost, regularly and reliably, whenever those arts become performance rather than practice. The principle is this: the man who has genuinely resolved the question of what he is capable of no longer needs the answer confirmed by anyone outside himself. This is not arrogance. Arrogance requires the confirmation. What Chuck Norris carried into the Shrine Auditorium on the night of March 14, 1981, and set down without announcement and picked back up when it was time to leave, was something different from arrogance. It was the freedom that belongs to a man who stopped asking the question 20 years ago and has not needed to ask it since. The show that evening raised $214,000 for veteran rehabilitation programs. The number is in the public record. Gerald Foss went home at 11:30. He stopped at a diner on Figueroa Street and had a cup of coffee and a piece of pie. He sat at the counter. He did not speak to anyone. He was thinking about something. The light in the diner was fluorescent and flat. Outside on Figueroa, the traffic moved the way traffic moves at that hour, steady and indifferent, carrying people who had not been in that room and did not know what had happened there, and were going home to their own lives, which were full of their own events that someone else would not know about. The world does not stop for the things that happen inside it. This is what makes the things that happen inside it matter. What a man carries into a room is not always visible until something tries to take it from him. The security personnel who walked toward the fourth from last row on the left aisle of the Shrine Auditorium that night were professionals doing their job. They were right to do it. Gerald Foss was right to do it. And what they discovered was not a threat, and was not a performance, and was not a man trying to prove something. It was a man who had finished proving it a long time ago, to himself, in rooms that were less comfortable than this one, in front of people who were less forgiving, under conditions that had no margin for the distance between what a man says he is and what he actually is. The distance between those two things. That is the only distance that finally matters. Next time we turn to a confrontation that took place on a film set in Nevada in April of 1983, when a stunt coordinator with a decade of experience and a very specific opinion about what was possible told Chuck Norris something in front of 22 crew members that he would spend the next 4 years wishing he could take back. That episode is called What the Coordinator Said and What the Take Showed, and it is coming very soon. Leave a comment before you go. Tell us where in the world you are watching from tonight. The number of places this story has reached is something we are still learning, and every location tells us something.